But have you noticed that things are changing? It's something that we can sense, but that we can't quite put our finger on it to explain. Why does it feel like everything is shifting at once? Our language is changing, our media is changing, our churches are changing, even language itself. Why do things that were once considered not a problem now seem controversial? This didn't happen overnight. And it didn't happen by accident because revolutions, yes, we're talking about them, don't always come with guns and chariots and tanks. Sometimes they come through classrooms, through pulpits, through headlines, through courtrooms. And if you don't understand how that works, well, I'm here to help you. I'm Cara Marcel, otherwise known as Carrie Bartholomew. I know it's complicated. And my focus is to be that mom next door voice who helps you understand what's going on in cultural issues. Now, there's a lot of people who say, oh, cultural issues, cultural things, we don't need to care about those. But those people want you to stay asleep. Those people want you to not be prepared to defend your family, to defend your values. And so today I'm going to talk about the third chapter or the third series of this, The Devil and Karl Marx. And we're going to talk about Antonio Gramsci and what his kind of tactics were for changing the culture. So one of the things I want to talk to you guys about is this idea. I've been using the term authoritarian a lot. I write a lot, and when I'm writing, I've been writing, we need to be aware of authoritarianism. These people are authoritarian. Okay, but there's a massive difference between authoritarian and totalitarian. Authoritarians, they say you must follow the rules, you must do this, you must behave in this way. And none of that is necessarily a good thing. It can be overpowering, it takes away our liberty, right? But totalitarianism takes it another level. Totalitarianism says that we must change your thoughts, we must change your beliefs, we must change more than just your actions. And that tends to be more of what we are facing today. They don't just want control over your actions, they want control over your thoughts, your beliefs, and your values. They want to change your view of reality itself. An authoritarian government might say, don't do that. But a totalitarian government says, don't even think it. And that's who Gramsci was. That's what he recognized. So Gramsci was this Italian philosopher who wrote a lot about changing and cultural revolutions while he was in prison. The thing is that nobody wanted these here in America because we had this thriving middle class. We had dads who could go to work, moms who could stay home and raise their kids, generally be happy, save up, go on a vacation. And so those things were a whole lot better than things were beforehand, say robber baron time, right? And the Great Depression. So we get past that. We get to a point where people aren't interested in communism, especially people who've come from it, who fled it. And so they realized, oh, well, in order to make this happen, we've got to change the institutions. And we talked a little bit about that last week when I mentioned when we covered Bella Dodd and Manning Johnson, two political activists, communist activists, cultural organizers of that time period. So Gramsci starts to realize we are going to have to fundamentally change things. And he calls it, well, he doesn't call it, we call it the long march through the institutions. So here is Mr. Gramsci. And one of the things that when they discuss it today, they call it cultural hegemony. So, but that wasn't his title. His title, it's going to take me a moment to find it. But let me just talk to you about what that looked like, the long march through the institutions. Well, the institutions were education. And so in order to fundamentally change education and to change what people believed about education, they had to go into they had to bring in teachers. So they said, "Oh, if you believe what we believe, come and be a teacher." And then to fundamentally change churches, right? That's one of the three parts of the stool. To fundamentally change churches, they told these people, "Come in, even though you believe what we want you to believe, even though you're a communist, which does mean you're an atheist, even though you're that, you should come in and be a preacher, come in and lead from the top and change your congregation." The media. So, one of the most powerful dissidents against the idea of communist infiltration was Yuri Bezmenov, and he was a member of the press. So, members of the press come in and only say things that are favorable towards us. This is what we were dealing with. And then, of course, law. And we see this today probably more so than I've ever recognized. I mean, today now we're at a time where you bite your nails and you hope that you get a judge who still believes in honesty, who still believes in real justice, not social justice, which quite frankly I would call social injustice. Um and he didn't want people to destroy from the outside because, see, when you destroy from the outside, when you are forceful, that requires resistance. That makes a person say, "Oh, no, not my family. You leave us alone. I'm going to stand." But if you can have a whole bunch of people who say, "There's nothing to see here. Don't worry about anything. There's nothing that's going to happen here." If you can have those kind of people, then we go back to, you can see my lovely face. If you can have those kind of people shushing everybody else down, then you can gain more progress. And progress is an important word because it's what they're constantly saying. So, authoritarianism forces all the way down, fundamentally down to your core, that you have to agree or at least give the illusion of agreeing. And there are many countries and, well, some states that are already in that place of you have to give the illusion of agreeing. And so what that's called is competencies. What we have in our schools, how that looks like competencies, we have cultural competencies or soft skills in which our children are supposed to learn. And the way that they're presented to them seems like something you shouldn't be worried about. In the next episode, I'm going to step aside and really break down how those cultural competencies are soft totalitarianism, um, but what they actually mean. And let me just give you one small example of that. Today, I was talking to a friend in another country, and this friend is divorced from his partner, and his partner is now with a male who identifies as female. And in order to get his kids to have custody, he has to say and do things and he has to be evaluated. She gets evaluated and she is the right level of woke. She's got the right competencies to be self-actualized. And you will see these words when you start to look at what our kids are expected to be. So self-actualized. She's self-actualized, so she gets a gold star of being that ideal person, and he gets a black mark for being too independent-minded, even at a quote risk to his own well-being. And again, that risk to his own well-being is simply not swallowing the lies, not being willing to repeat things. So I want to ask you, as you're listening, as you're thinking about this, what of Gramsci's tactics have you witnessed? And please feel free to put them in the notes. Now, one thing is that a ton of people will claim that tolerance is the end all be all. But Marx was never about tolerance. In fact, he says here, force is the midwife of every old society, pregnant with a new one. It is in itself economic power. So, when we hear the word tolerance, we are presented with this idea that we live and let live. That's generally what most of us have accepted tolerance as being. Now, I want you to think about these quote tolerant and kind people while I tell you a story that happened yesterday evening. Several people, probably 50 and up, were joining a conversation to listen to Nick Shirley's mother talk about fraud over Zoom. This is something that anybody's welcome to and nobody's forced to. Remember those, because in the terms of fascism, nobody's forced to listen to this, right? So these people, they decide to open up their Zoom and to listen, and all of a sudden they get a stream of what we'll call corn, very, very graphic images put in front of a bunch of LDS people in Utah who simply want to do their civic duty, but they are forced to see something. It's put in front of their faces, and their only option is to either continue to watch it or to back off and not listen to the arguments, not listen to the evidence that's put in front of them. So you tell me how these people who demand that they are celebrated, how exactly is what they're doing a fair, tolerant, or kind thing to do? So let's go back to Mr. Gramsci. Gramsci understood something that other people had missed, and that's that power isn't just held through politics or economics, it is held through culture. So this is why he decided that if you wanted to change a society, you don't start by tearing down the government. That would be too obvious to the people on the other side of you. So you don't start by tearing down the government. You start by reshaping the culture. And again, we started calling that the long march through the institutions. There is a specific term that he called it, and I wish I had my notes in front of me, but of course I don't. But I want to give you an example of what that looks like by playing a video of
she and her,
here you go.
and I am disabled cisgender lesbian. The Jesus that I know would be right here in this gallery, lined up to speak during this public comment, standing in solidarity with the brave people here. The Jesus I know would be dressed in full drag and serving face, or wrapped in the garb of a non-binary person who knows one gender is way too small to capture their gloriousness.
Stop that.
Okay, so this channel it comes from a really great YouTuber that I really highly recommend, called The Mirror Reflecting the Left. And she's a former leftist academic, and she goes through all the things she was told never to watch. Let's take a look at what that person said. The Jesus that I know. Okay, this is, we have now turned God into this emotional, I feel this way, instead of looking at the sources that we have for, if that is the religion that you choose, this is what it says. In fact, we now take the Jesus that I know and say he would be in full drag. Well, I think that people, wherever they stand on the spectrum of, if they are a respecter of the person that Christ was, they would say he was authentic. So why then would he need to masquerade in drag? Drag simply means falsehood. It means pretension. So why then would he need to express himself in a pretentious way when he never did? And see, that is the viewpoint of the Christian church. So for these people to come in and again take a look at what Gramsci says, go into the churches, change them from the bottom up, come in and be the new priests, be the new pastors. What I see is a mockery. Now, that woman, she's more extreme with her short hair and her collar, and they wear their rainbow collars and everything else. She's more extreme. So a lot of people might say, yeah, that's not for me. But somebody like Mr. Tellerico, James Tellerico, he's clean cut. He talks with a calm voice and says that we should love people. Now he quotes a totally different gospel, but young people are starting to say he is the embodiment of what a true Christian should be. No, he may be the embodiment of what a quote unquote good person by your definition of good should be. but he's not the embodiment of what their own scriptures say. That's like saying a drag queen would be, great as Buddha. No, that's not what their own religious sources say. So they come in and they say you must fundamentally change these things. So that is Mr. Gramsci. Now, let's take a look at some of the other things that have changed. Change happens very slowly. And here's an example from a newspaper on words that the Democrat Party was told to pull back on because they were coded words. Now, the thing about being coded words are they're words that we look at and we go, oh, I know what that means, but they mean something very different. And they signify that these people believe in the certain ideology if they're using these words. So you and I may have a very based opinion on what privilege is, but their definition may be something very, very different. The same thing, I think the perfect example for that is woman. We may know that a woman is an adult human female, but somebody else may be taught and may be teaching our children that a female or a woman is anyone who claims they are or feels like one. Um, Dialoguing, othering, triggering, microaggression, assault. That one I'm really interested in because I am wondering how me not agreeing with something and saying, I don't want any part of that, and I'm going to check my kids out of school so that they're not going to be a part of that. Um, but you do you is an assault. Meanwhile, this Thursday, I'm going to interview Animosity Ari, who is a detransitioner who can't walk in public places without a fear of actual physical assault, who has video of the trans militant groups charging after her with a look on their face like, I'm going to destroy you. But it's assault for me to say, no, thank you. I don't appreciate what you're doing, having a stripper at the school. Now, the stripper that came to that came to the school in my district was not stripping when they came to the thing, but what they came to do was to teach a lesson on kindness and tolerance. And then when the parents got upset about it, the parents were told that they were bigots. And that was really always the tactic because the issue was never the issue. The issue is always the revolution. And so a bunch of people could get on and harass people and shut them down and make them not talk. And, school representatives could say, we don't know what you're talking about, and gaslight them and tell them, you're just not inclusive. That's another great word for this list. You aren't inclusive because if you were inclusive, you wouldn't judge the person for what they do outside of the school, despite the fact that some people feel that whoever is, coming to a school should probably be vetted and be a person of good character. But that is kind of how they do it. So that issue becomes, it was never the fact that the person came, it's the reaction to the fact that the person came. And truth and reason and morality become subjective. So when that happens, let me see. It doesn't always have to be loud. It can be extremely subtle as language shifts, as we no longer talk about two sexes or male and female, but instead we have conversations about gender. Language is shifting. As we redefine harm and say anybody who does not absolutely support things that they have always found immoral or indecent, but if they don't support them, then they're causing harm and potentially genocide. So this is a redefining again of language, redefining of justice. Kids going to school in inequitable, i.e., not socialist schooling, is then injustice. And every kid should be exposed to what Randy Weingarten says every kid should be exposed to. That's the only true justice. Or justice that says that an illegal immigrant can kill a college girl and you aren't supposed to say the college girl's name or call the illegal immigrant illegal under the name of justice. So truth becomes flexible. Truth becomes flexible, meaning it's whatever you feel it is. And you tell me how you stand. How are you a person of character if there is no truth? My friend who went through the situation and was marked low on that rating scale said that it's very obvious that people agree, but they feel so beaten into a corner that they don't dare speak because they're going to, not only are they going to be made to feel stupid, but their businesses are going to be targeted, their personality is going to be slandered. So the truth becomes flexible and it feels like this makes me safe. Living a lie makes me safe because then they won't attack me. And it's all based on perspective. What they say is there is no truth but power. It's not a way that many people want to live. So if truth becomes flexible, then everything becomes negotiable. So let's take an example that I find kind of funny about truth. This woman here, well, this person here is Sarah McBride. Sarah McBride says Trump should quit pretending to be a cowboy because she hates when people act like something they're not. Now, if this was truthfully written, it would say Sarah McBride has another name, but I don't have a problem with calling Sarah Sarah because that is the legal name. So Sarah McBride says Trump should quit pretending to be a cowboy because he hates when people act like something that they're not. But see, our media is already captured, our press is already captured, so they're going to put this out the way that they want it to be seen. Now, this person also knows exactly that they're going to cause outrage, but they do it in such a way that they're calm, cool, and collected, much like Tellerico. Calm, cool, collected. There's never any reason to question this person. He's not crazy and out of control. He's just a good, decent person that we should all be like. It's all tactic. So let me hit some more and explain to you this man. So this is Yuri Bezmenov, and I'm going to read it really quickly and then I'll break it down. So he says the stages of ideological subversion. First, let's explain that word subversion because most people think we're not being subverted unless we've got like army military people in night with night vision coming after us. That's not subversion. Subversion is the people who look calm, cool, and collected, and they never question them being the people who are teaching your children how they should think, their right views. So let's take a look. Stages of ideological subversion, demoralization, educate an entire generation in Marxist ideology. Well, a couple of weeks ago, or maybe about a month ago, I did an episode called Oikophobia. Oikophobia is the fear or loathing of your homeland. We're there. So many people think that America deserves to be the place that is just looted for its quote unquote past sins. And the sad thing is that our kids don't really have an education that tells them that every place has done the same kind of sins that America has done. In fact, other places have done them worse. Other religions have been worse. Slavery has looked worse in other places. Am I excusing it? No. I'm saying that children and we should have been taught the truth. And then we could look in true perspective. So he also says the next one, destabilization, economy, foreign relations, and defense systems. All right, let's look at that. Destabilization of economy. Well, what exactly happens when you open up your borders, let people come in? See, America used to be this place that would welcome people and say, bring me, you're tired, you're hungry, you're weak, those yearning to be free. that being free, that freedom and liberty to go out and do and be for yourself was what drew people here. They did not get subsidies when they came here. They worked and they survived or they failed on their own. Today, we are a country of entitlement. We are a country of welfare. Now, people will say, oh, well, those newcomers don't get welfare. No, what they get is services from NGOs. But where do NGOs get their money from? Taxpayers. So it might as well be welfare. So we are destabilized while we're being demoralized. Our kids can't think about a future because there is no legacy for them. Not for the working class and the up and the middle class, upwardly mobile, just barely trying to hang on and have a little bit more for their kids. For the people on the top, they'll be fine. But for those people in this area, they won't be. And because of that, they lean towards socialism. They lean towards, I just need a break. Universal income would be so amazing if I could just have a break. And they don't think, where does it come from? When does other people's money run out? So our children are taught to be entitled. Meanwhile, we've opened up our doors so people can take even their entitlement. So that's two. Let's look at his next one. Crisis, violent change of power, structure, and economy. Well, we've had some moments of crisis. Some people might say a certain pandemic was a moment of crisis and a massive change of economy. And then there's normalization. That, I said fudge, like the chocolate. That is when people accept it. That is when 30 parents in a group say, I don't like what's going on. Why are they doing this to our kids? And you say, speak up. And they say, I can't. I might get doxxed. My family's worked so hard for everything we have. I can't. And the fear is what stops people. Or the normalization that it's perfectly fine and acceptable to stream pornographic images onto people's private phone calls, or maybe not private, but to their Zoom calls with a specific agenda that had nothing to do with that. But you shove that stuff down their faces, and there's not massive amounts of outrage because it's normal, because we expect it, because that is what we expect from the activists. Or a situation which I'm personally familiar with, where there were 5 days of bomb threats on a school that I got blamed for. And it was normal. Nobody needed to investigate who might have done it. Just say it was probably her. That is normalization, you guys. And this is what he said in 1984. That's kind of funny in itself, isn't it? The irony. So in 1984, he said that. So what do we do about it? Because I don't like to leave anybody in. Whoa, water just spilt. I don't like to leave anybody in a place where they feel hopeless. And it is discouraging. But I always believe that knowledge is power. So the first thing that you have to do is recognize it. And there are many channels that will help you recognize it. My kind of goal, my focus is to be that mom next door, that voice who will look for and know the hard things, but will tell you in small doses so that it's not super overwhelming. The next thing is to reorganize. The same institutions that have been infiltrated can be changed. You have to get involved. You have to volunteer. You might say, oh, I'm too busy. Well, if you're too busy, then you leave a spot open for people who will subvert. So you've got to be the person who, makes the time to be the mentor to young people, makes the time to maybe get back into scouts. I know of scout troops that have done an amazing job of keeping their scout troop true to original scouting. Get into your communities. NGOs replaced a lot of the voluntary things like food banks. They replaced a lot of these things. The problem is that when they do, they also teach the people that are coming to them, if you vote this way, there will be more of this. As opposed to the fact that churches and communities have always been who have fixed the problems. So the same places that shape the culture that Gramsci wanted to target, he wanted to target for a reason, because they're effective when they are strong. I don't want you to leave fearful. I just want you to know what we're not supposed to know. I want you to not put your head in the sand. I want you to second guess and to even steer clear of the people who say there's nothing to see here. The school board members who say, I don't know what they're complaining about. Everything's fine. No, it's really, really not. And in next week's episode, I'm going to break down the competencies, which is literally what they're called, by Castle. And I'm going to break down, maybe with a guest, social and emotional learning, and how that is the totalitarian, how it is your children need to believe these things in order to be college and career ready. That's where we're at with all of this. Just going to check my chat notes. I would say robber baron was past the version of tax the rich. Yes. Yes. And hey, thank you, Terrible. I'm so glad that you're here. And Terrible, which is, terrible, is a teacher. So you guys, it's so important that you know. And what I try to do, even though right now I'm covered with water, so I'm feeling a little awkward as I'm closing, but what I'm trying to do is present this in a palatable way. Unfortunately, the things that we need to know today are not things that we ever thought we would need to know. Gramsci, Marcuse went as far as to say that you don't have to use force if you can teach people to hate their country. If you so we've been teaching hate. That's the subversion. And we may wave our little American flags and say, woohoo, it's America's 250th. But behind closed doors, there's a lot of America is a stain that our kids are being taught. This is, it is what it is. But it doesn't have to be that way. So I want to encourage you to get involved. I really want to encourage you to go and watch that reflecting the mirror reflecting the left. Some of her stuff might be a little bit bold for some of my audience, but I think most people can handle it. And just recognize that, as long as we're breathing, we can model truth for others. We can, as long as we're learning, we can repeat it. We can repeat what we've learned and help more people steer away from this. Recognize that tolerance is an utter, there is nothing biblical about tolerance. In fact, it's warned against 3 to 5 times in the Bible. But also, when I was having this discussion with a bunch of youth, I realized that it's also the whole book of Proverbs is like, my son, seek wisdom, seek understanding, which is the opposite of just being tolerant of absolutely everything and letting everything go. You're not supposed to let everything go. It doesn't make for a wise or a safe society or a thriving society. And we're lied to and gaslit when we're told that that is what we should be about. So the last thing is, I would say robber baron was the past version of tax the rich. Yeah, Yeah, I mean, there were definitely people who lived it up, but there's always two sides to the story, and a lot of those people in those mining communities lived better having somebody come in who said, "I'm gonna build schools here. I'm going to build a community here. I'm gonna give discounts to my workers." Did they live like the other people? No, not by a long shot. But why does everything have to be a comparison? Why does everything have to be about grievance? Well, it has to be because that's what Marxism is. Marx will always, always be about grievance and misery and violence. And those are the reasons that we should stay away from it. So I appreciate you all for coming on and listening. This was the second time because once again, I accidentally hit mute. And so I had to re record. But thank you so much. Please leave your comments. Please like, share, and I'll see you next week. Bye.